Okay, hello everyone. Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening if you're in some other part of the world than Australia. I hope everyone's had a good day today. So, just before we kick off, if you could give me a sign of life that my audio and video is getting out there, if you could type OK in the comments box for this live feed, that'll give me some reassurance that people are actually hearing and seeing this. All right, so this is week 3 of this series, and today we're going to be talking about how your clinic can avoid the commodity trap. So I'm going to talk a little about what that means, what the commodity trap is. So let me start by giving you a story. Okay, so a few years ago, I needed to find a new optometrist. So I asked a couple of people close to me if they could recommend an optometrist to go to. And the first person I asked, they said, "Look, I can highly recommend practice A." I'm redacting the names here. I can highly recommend practice A. She's really thorough. She takes her time with my eye exam. She's great at answering all my questions. She's fantastic. Well, she was fantastic when it came to finding her son a pair of glasses that fit him properly. He enjoys wearing. So glowing testimonial. And I asked another person close to me, and she said, "Well, I just go to, insert corporate brand here." She said their glasses always seem the cheapest. So those are two very different attitudes about eye care. Okay. And so let me ask you, would you prefer more of patient A, or would you prefer more of patient B? And I think most of you would probably say patient A, because, well, I mean, that person obviously appreciates the skill and expertise and everything else that you could bring to the table, whereas patient B is simply defaulting to compare by price. The problem is that there are an awful lot of patient Bs out there. So I guess the question is, how do you find more of patient A, and how do you convert some of patient Bs into patient As? Because that's the kind of patient I think that you really need in order to grow your practice. So today we're going to talk about, why does it feel like patients only care about price? I mean, obviously not all of them do, but a lot of them do. No matter how good your service is. Why do patients undervalue your expertise, and whose job is it to fix that? And spoiler alert, it's not the patient's fault that they don't fully understand the value that you bring to the table. I'm going to talk about how we can address that. We're also going to talk about what I call the 15-second brand shift. Okay. How does it change the conversation from price to value? And I'm going to give you a formula that you can use in your business to manifest that brand shift. And we're going to talk about what it looks like when your practice stops competing on price and starts competing on trust. So I'm going to start with some bold assumptions here as usual. So I'm going to assume that you're here because you are the owner or the manager, or planning to become owner or manager of an optometry practice, an audiology practice, or an ophthalmology practice. Second bold assumption is that you're here because you're interested in actually growing such a practice, whether that be actual or hypothetical. And just to give a heads up that if any of the ideas that we talk about today resonate with where you're at right now, then you can book a free one-to-one Zoom call with me through my agency website, opticsdigital.net. So just briefly, so who am I? So my name's Paul Salloway. So I'm the owner of Optics Digital Marketing. I started this agency at the end of 2022. I've been in digital marketing and web development for about 20 years. But I launched this agency specifically to work with optometrists, independent optometrists in Australia and New Zealand. So since then, the agency's expanded a little bit to also support ophthalmologists and audiologists. If you're any of those three industry verticals, then that's who we support. All right, so let's talk about this thing called the commodity trap. So a commodity, by definition, a commodity is any product or service where the customer believes that there's no meaningful difference between providers, so they choose on price. So it's like, if my chore is to go to the supermarket and buy a carton of milk, so unless I've got some actual experience with brands, I'm probably just going to look at all of them and just pick the cheapest one. A carton of milk is a carton of milk. I can't really discern any meaningful difference between the different labels. So unfortunately, that's the position that many independent clinics find themselves in today, whether that be optometrists, audiologists, or ophthalmologists. So, for example, with optometrists, so patients are comparing you to the corporate chains, like the Specsavers, the Oscar Wileys, and so on. They're looking at the online retailers, and then more and more of those every year. They're looking at these like 2-for-1 discount offers that competitors are out there with, and a lot of patients are saying, well, lenses are lenses, frames are frames, so why should I pay more than I have to? I don't get it. With audiologists, so like a big part of your revenue stream, of course, is from selling hearing aids, but so there's so much competition now for hearing aids. Like there are these OTC models, over-the-counter models that patients can get through pharmacies or from places like Costco, Chemist Warehouse, online. There are heaps of models that you can buy through Amazon. And so a lot of patients are saying, well, hearing aids are basically all the same, so why should I pay more? Okay, it's the same mentality, this patient B mentality. And so you might think, well, ophthalmologists are a little bit different because we don't do retail, we sell surgical procedures, and I think in some ways ophthalmology is a little bit of a victim of its own success. And I'm going to talk mostly about LASIK because I think LASIK is kind of like the segment of the ophthalmology sector where it's mostly patient driven. Like for other things like cataracts and anti-VEGF injections and all that sort of stuff, in a lot of cases patients will just go with whatever their GP recommends. Although even there, I think that there is still some shopping going on. But let's stick with LASIK for now. I think in some senses ophthalmologists are kind of a victim of their own success, in the sense that you've spent years sort of educating the public that laser eye surgery is very safe and it's almost like a routine surgery now. The techniques and the equipment and training has just become so good that that's almost like a standard. It's a standardized procedure now, and so people are taking this all on board and saying, great, so if LASIK is so standardized, why shouldn't I just compare on price and pick the cheapest option? And even like, I think ophthalmologists themselves, clinics, I see their websites, and a big part of their messaging is around cost per price. So you're almost training people to do that price comparison. And so there's that. I mean, also these days there's things like medical tourism that are a factor. So I think people are aware that they can go to South Korea or Thailand, maybe even Vietnam now, and get some of these procedures done for probably about half what they would pay in Australia. So there are some price some price pressures that apply even to surgical procedures, laser eye surgery being one of them. So does this make sense? Does this make sense, any of what I've said so far? So if you've ever experienced any kind of patients who do this price comparison, or if you've had conversations with patients about price comparison, can you type a 1? Can you type a 1 in the comment box now? I'll be very curious to know. Okay, so that is the commodity trap. So and it happens because patients, they can't discern the true value that you provide, and before they can get to that point, before they can get to the point of educating themselves about, you know, what is the actual difference between clinics, you need to connect with them through your messaging. And I think this is a step that gets missed often along the way. I see an awful lot of generic messaging out there. So, and this fails the test, because if people don't feel as though you're talking to them, they tend to skip the message and move on to the next. You know, they scroll up on their Facebook feed, more or less. So, you know, people, it's like the old joke, you know, everyone's favorite radio station is WIIFM. What's in it for me? So your messaging really needs to connect with your target audience, your ideal patient, before you can start that process of educating about value. So there's a gap between what the patients know, or what the patient has internalized about what you're providing, and what it is that you actually know, and the real things, the real value that you can bring. So, you know, optometrists know that not all lenses and not all frames fit, not all lenses are equal and not all frames fit equally. Audiologists know that the device itself is only about 20% of the result, and programming and follow-up care is the other 80, right? Ophthalmologists know that the laser equipment that you choose, the post-surgical planning, the surgeon experience, all of these can affect outcomes, okay? So it's your job, through your messaging, through your marketing, to bridge that gap between what the patient thinks they know and what is actually the case. So you can think of this as a 3-step process. You need to connect, they need to understand the value, and when those 2 things happen, then they can begin to trust you. And trust is when that patient actually, or trust is what converts a potential patient into an actual patient. Okay, so but I think a lot of practices I've seen, they jump straight to the 3rd step and ask potential patients to trust them from the get-go, without doing those other 2 things first, connecting with a message and educating about value. So this is where I'm going to introduce to you something that we call the 15-second brand shift. So it's a 15-second brand shift because I'm going to give you a formula that you can use to drop into your own messaging, and this is for your website, for your ads, you know, for email marketing, everything really. So this is a formula that you can use, and it goes something like this. So let's say we're talking about the homepage of your website. Okay, so there should be something on there that says, "We help," and then the audience identifier, who feel, call out the problem that they're facing, by or through the solution. What is it that you do to rectify that problem? So they can, and then the outcome. So what is the change that the change that you bring about in that person's life? Okay, what is the outcome? What is the future, desirable state that they reach after they go through this encounter with you? So let's look at some examples. So for optometry, okay, so using this formula, your homepage might say something like, "We help Sydney residents who feel that basic eyewear doesn't meet their needs by offering a premium selection of frames and lenses so they can look great and enjoy clear vision in every situation." Okay, that's the message that should be on your homepage. And if you can't say it in less than 15 seconds, then it's really too long. You really need to rethink it. Okay, it's got to be compact enough, succinct enough that every person in your practice at a push could recite it. And full disclosure, this formula is something that I've learned from a marketing consultant in the US. His name is Don Miller, and he's successfully helped his clients implement this for years and years. And he says what you can do is like pull out a roll of banknotes, folded up in a rubber band, like in one of those mafia movies or something. Walk around your clinic and one by one point out your staff and say, "Can you repeat our brand message?" And if they can get it word perfect, then you peel off one of those notes with, let's say, $10 notes. Let's keep it reasonable. Peel off a $10 note and give it to them. Do that a couple of times. Do that for a few months, and you'll be surprised how quickly your whole team internalizes this brand message. And it's important because that then becomes your North Star. It kind of like guides everything you do in terms of your marketing, your messaging. So let's look at a couple more examples. Okay, so for audiology, could be something like, "We help seniors who feel worried about hearing loss by offering truly independent hearing aid selection, personalized fitting, and long-term support so they can stay connected in daily life with those who matter." Okay. For ophthalmology, another example might be something like this. So we help busy professionals who feel frustrated with daily eyewear by offering advanced laser procedures and local eye surgeon support so they can feel confident about their long-term vision freedom. Okay. So, you work it for your own situation. You take the formula and, maybe brainstorm with your team how you would fill the gaps, plug in the variables in this formula. But I promise you that if you go through this, you'll end up with something that becomes your North Star for all of your marketing efforts and gives you a repeatable message, a consistent message that you can use. Because that's one of the things that, well, you've heard the saying that if you confuse them, you lose them. So if you have a consistent message that everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet, that consistency is going to land a lot better with your ideal patients. So how does this benefit you? Well, so when you implement this brand shift for optometrists, it means that patients stop asking you, can you price match with some other, big name retailer down the road? They start asking you, what frames do you recommend for me? So you move from being a dispenser to a trusted eyewear consultant. That's a big shift. The average value of your patient interactions increases. You start providing higher value lenses, higher value frames. You can even start opening up some of these conversations about other clinical services that you provide, because by this stage, you've built up that trust. You've got the know, like, and trust factors working for you. Your practice becomes the clinic for people who take their eyewear seriously. And I've seen this change happen with clients who've gone down this route of saying, no, we're not going to compete on price. We're going to take a different approach. For audiologists, patients stop treating you as a product distributor, and they start deferring to you as a hearing specialist. So that means higher acceptance rates, better compliance, more follow-up visits. So patients tell other people that they know, you need to see my audiologist, and not just, oh, well, I found a cheap hearing aid. So for ophthalmologists, patients arrive at your door already sold on the value of choosing the right surgeon. So that word of mouth message becomes, I trusted them with my eyes, not just, oh, I went with them because they were cheap. So that's a big shift. Okay, when you can achieve these things, when you reach this point, it means you've escaped the commodity trap, and patients are connecting with you, valuing what you can provide, and they've built trust with your practice. So what does that mean for an actual digital marketing strategy? Well, as I've said before in previous weeks, so a lot of that depends on where you are now in your business. So with all of the clients that we work with in my practice, that we work with in my agency, so we like to start off by doing a comprehensive digital audit. So that looks at what are your current strengths, your weaknesses, what are your goals, and what are the gaps in your marketing strategy. So there's essentially 3 stages to this. So first is getting the foundations right. So you can't scale what isn't working. So before we can go much further, we need to make sure that you have a professional, mobile-friendly website that correctly positions your brand. All of the things that we've talked about today. Your website has this 15-second brand shift message behind it. Do you have a fully optimized Google business profile? And this is very important these days for visibility in local Google Maps. Do you have a consistent social media presence out there? People are checking Facebook pages, Facebook business pages, Instagram business accounts. You're kind of expected to have all of these things. Blog content. So another thing I think that's becoming expected is to have some sort of content on your website that positions you as an authority in your niche. Okay, particularly if your practice has some, like if you have a special interest in something, like for example, if your practice wants to become known as like one of the leading ortho K providers in your part of the city, then I think a lot of patients would expect to see articles, contents on there that talk about ortho K, like what are the benefits, who's it for, how much does it cost, what do daily routines look like, all of this kind of stuff. So that's all part of getting the foundation right. Stage 2 would be where we build this growth engine. So putting in place reputation management systems so you can get this steady flow of Google reviews happening, which is very important. Conversion rate optimization. So making sure that when people come to your website that there's no friction in the booking process. Patient education, email marketing. So, I've talked in this presentation about how it's so important that patients understand the value that you bring. And it's often difficult to communicate all of that in just one sitting, whereas with email marketing, you can really drip feed that over a period of time. So once people are in your email marketing system, then you can really inform them over a period of time. And then the final step is when all of this is in place would be stage 3. This is where we scale what's working through like Google Ads, Meta Ads, and maybe some blue ocean opportunities like YouTube, community sponsorships, podcast advertising, that sort of thing. Does anyone have a question at this point before we wrap up? If you have a question, now's the time. Pop it in the chat box. So I'm going to leave you with a thought here. So that the clinics that win over the next 10 years will not be the cheapest. I think trying to be the cheapest is a race to the bottom that you can't win. The clinics that win will be the ones whose patients connect with their message, who understand the value of their expertise and trust them enough to never look anywhere else. So if you've built your branding to this point, then I think you've got a really strong foundation for your business. And this is going to be the type of clinics who do well over the coming years. So I'll leave it there for today. So don't forget, so if you do want to have a quick chat with me, 15-minute Zoom call, you can connect through our website, opticsdigital.net. All right, so have a good one, guys. We'll see you next week.